Hi, and welcome to Bake to the Future, the show where we examine what is happening in the baking industry with a future-focused lens. I'm Katie Jewell.
And I'm Hailey Blumenreich.
And today we're bringing you a special episode with information security expert Michael Coates.
Michael Coates is the former Chief Information Security Officer at Twitter, former Head of Security at Mozilla, and current CEO of Altitude Networks. I sat down with him at ABA Convention right before he gave his presentation on how to build a security program that succeeds. And during our conversation, we talked about how he's seen the pandemic impact the cybersecurity space, where he recommends baking companies prioritize their security, and my personal favorite part of the conversation was when we discussed how future technology can help secure the future of the baking companies, and that includes things like the Internet of Things, blockchain, cryptocurrency, and more. And he's really good at just kind of breaking it all down, helping explain what these words even mean. And I think our listeners are going to learn a lot from him. So let's get into it. Welcome. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, very excited to be here.
Well, my first question to you is a bit of a hardball. What is your favorite baked good?
My favorite baked good. That is a great question. I would have to go with a perfectly made morning scone with blueberries.
Oh, are morning scones different than afternoon? Or are they all the same?
That's a good point. I would just sort of, I don't know if everyone's eating scones all the time, but It's definitely for the morning time.
Okay, yum. I also love a good scone. And we were recording this at the ABA convention, so I'm sure you had a lot of time to think about that question on your way in to convention, since you're going to be meeting a lot of people in the baking industry. But I know that you're here to talk about security, so I wanted to dive into it with you on the podcast a little bit here. And maybe first we could go into your background and what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, I've had a pretty interesting career in the cybersecurity field. I'm currently the CEO of Altitude Networks, a cybersecurity-focused firm protecting data in the cloud. I've previously been the CISO, or the head of information security for Twitter, also for Mozilla Firefox.
I've heard of those before.
Yeah. I mean, really fascinating roles where hundreds of millions of users around the world and protecting their data and their uses. And really, I got to that place in my career after probably a decade of hands-on hacking experience. So I was literally the person who was hired by banks, governments, telcos to hack into their systems, find ways physically into their bank, convince people to give me their passwords, and really exploit all those flaws to show them how they could protect their systems ahead of time. So after doing that for quite an amount of time, moved to the Bay Area and said, how do we build programs at scale on these fast-moving tech companies to solve these problems?
Yeah, so it sounds like you're the guy to know how to protect companies from these security breaches. You have to first know how to get in yourself. And I think that's what you did. Definitely.
It's really important because I think anyone that is watching cybersecurity from the sides, you see it on the news and you see it in the movies, you see all this hype and this made up elements of it. And you really have to understand, like, how does this actually work? Let's separate fact from fiction. Let's prioritize what matters most so we can actually do that at scale.
I know with the pandemic, it's really accelerated a lot of technology. Things are going so much more digital these days. How have you seen the acceleration of the use of technology impacting the cybersecurity? And then we'll tie it back to the baking industry after that.
Yeah, the pandemic has caused just a rapid adoption of a new way of working. We used to work in the office. We used to be next to each other. If we got a strange email, from Betty 2 desks over, we could go over and say, hey, Betty, what's this about? Oh, I didn't send that. Now we're working at home. We have our personal computer. We have our kids, our pets, typing on the keyboard, maybe. We have all these new challenges for security. And the one thing about cybersecurity is that the bad guys are just as much a business as we are. They employ people with good paying jobs. They have workflows and runbooks. They have support lines. So when they see a shift in their victim's way of working, they react. And so as we all went to work from home now, the scammers were using new techniques. Oh, your VPN is slow. Here's a new VPN page. Just log in like you always do. Lo and behold, boom, there's a big breach that a major company experienced. Or you're sharing documents in these different ways. I hope you don't ever share it to the wrong person by mistake. Another way of breaching information. And so the pandemic really accelerated all these things. People were thinking about this work from home reality, this BYOD, bring your own device. But, all of a sudden in March of a couple years ago, it just happened instantly. And people were left scrambling. And the thing about security is that many times you want to prepare and you want to get it right before you do it. We didn't have that luxury. Like, we're now all at home today. So business either keeps going or it stops. And so that's where the rubber meets the road on security moving as fast as they can to keep business moving.
Yeah. Have you seen increasing instances of hacking, would you say, since the pandemic started?
I would say, yeah, the general trends tend to support that hacking continues to go, up in terms of its impact, its frequency, definitely taking advantage of situations like this. Mm-hmm. You also see cybercrime increasing around big events. So, for example, the Ukrainian-Russian war, that leads to follow-on scammers saying, here's a way to donate, here's a way to support. And, a good percentage of those are all malicious, looking to steal your money, your bank accounts, et cetera. It's unfortunate, to say it mildly, but those things always continue to increase.
Yeah, that's really terrifying. But I'm wondering, what do you see with the baking industry that could be particular challenges or particular strengths in their cybersecurity systems? One
of the things that has changed around the field of cybersecurity is, so many years ago, in tech terms, so let's say 10 or 20 years, it was a very specialized niche kind of scenario or risk. And it only affected, a number of companies. Maybe go back 10, 20 years and you think about, governments being targeted, or government facilities, or energy, things like that. But the reality is today is that businesses run on technology, full stop. So you don't have to be a technology-focused company with a technology product to have technology woven throughout your business and your operations. And these cyber criminals no longer have to specifically target you by name. In fact, because it's a business, they found ways to just opportunistically target people that are vulnerable. There are websites that they can use and search for, give me a list of machines that are vulnerable to this latest flaw. I will go automatically attack all of them. Whichever ones I take control of, I'll find out who they are and then how to monetize it. And that's why we see the rise of ransomware. Ransomware has shut down meat processing facilities, it's shut down gas pipelines, it shuts down hospitals. And so this is something that the agriculture industry, the baked good industry, et cetera, is going to have to think about, that even if they are not specifically targeted by the bad guys, they still may be victims if they happen to have flaws and vulnerabilities. Mm-hmm. And so looking back to this, you have to sort of prioritize, of the things that matter most to us, do we care about our web server that may show the lunch menu? Maybe, maybe not. Do we care about the accounting system and how we do billing? Probably. Do we care about logistics and what happens if that grinds to a halt from technology? Definitely. And that's where we need to start to apply, our security diligence. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so making sure that the most important data is secured first, and then you kind of go from there.
Yeah, both data and operations, because that's where it might get. You might not think of it initially. You might think of, sure, personal data, credit card data. Of course, we want to protect those. But what if you can no longer interact with your suppliers and your logistics? That would be just as damaging. If all logistics ground to a halt, how many days could you go before that was catastrophic? Mm-hmm. And so that's where you need to unravel, well, what core technology is involved here? How do we do fleet management or interacting with our partners? And those are where you can have, build fail-safes, build alternate methods, and apply security diligence.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to think about. And maybe switching gears a little bit, could you share with us, our podcast is called Bake to the Future. So we're thinking about the future. What are those technologies that are up and coming that you are looking at, that you're thinking, okay, people need to be aware of this, they need to maybe start implementing it, or what are some of those things that you're seeing coming up that can help companies?
Yeah, this is the fun part of conversations. What's the sci-fi that's here and going to just keep emerging? So a few areas. One, I'll throw out Internet of Things, drones, things of that nature. And so you're going to see this farther back in the supply chain, actually at the farms and the fields where they're using those products to treat crops, treat plants, monitor the health of agricultural goods, and doing that in a far more effective and efficient way through just internet-connected devices and drones. And so we see some of that happening already today. On the other side, something that you may hear about, cryptocurrencies and blockchain. Lots of fascinating applications of those, but as we take it back to the baked good industry, we can think about cryptocurrencies as a payment vector, as one that may emerge. can't sit here and say that there's a ton of people that are trying to bust down the doors today and pay in Bitcoin for, their delicious morning scone. But that's not to say that as they evolve payments through cryptocurrencies that they won't want a ubiquitous way of doing that. So you may see point of sale desires for cryptocurrency. On the other side of that, blockchain as a technology has some really interesting applications. So we think about it as a trusted distributed ledger. And then we ask the question, where is that technology good to solve a problem? We don't want to just run around trying to sprinkle cool technology on things and hope it does something. And so for that, we can think about supply chains and logistics. If you need to have a trusted way of recording movement of goods across different locations, different suppliers with traceability in a way that is tamper-proof, that's where blockchain could really be helpful. And for the food logistics industry, you can think of that as a pretty helpful addition to the technology stack.
Yeah, I know this is like a lot of tech vocab, Internet of Things, blockchain, cryptocurrency. And so maybe just to take a step back for a second, could you maybe just take us through like how all those things interact with each other?
Yeah, so Internet of Things is just a somewhat generic way of saying you've got a piece of machinery or hardware and now it's connected to the internet. So while it used to be able to do something and it would just sit in a field by itself, now it can relay things over the internet back to some software and you can keep track of it.
Okay, so physical things, even though they're physical, they're still existing on the internet somewhere.
Right, right. So if we wanted to really think about a rudimentary way, think about your cell phone being strapped to a tractor and being able to connect over your data connection back to your server and your web applications to see what's going on. Okay. Obviously, it's done a little bit more elegantly than that.
So how would you say the Internet of Things interacts with blockchain?
Yeah, good question. So you can think of them as two different categories of technology. And if you have the right problem that necessitates them to come together, they could. But they could also work independently.
Okay. And then cryptocurrency is a blockchain kind of backs up cryptocurrency. Is that correct?
Yeah, so to think about cryptocurrency, I mean, one, conceptually, we're looking to have a way of doing payment or transfer of value that is independent of government-backed, financial institutions, independent of the standard, dollar or fiat. Some of the key items around cryptocurrency is that it is distributed, it's independent of these organizations, and it's built in a way that is, let's say, tamper-proof or resistant to common attacks. Because if I was to say, hey, I'll transfer you $5, a naive way could be like, well, what if I just like copy and pasted that method, like just duplicated it like we do a file in a computer? Obviously, that wouldn't work in cryptocurrency. And so because cryptocurrency is based upon this technology called blockchain, it's been designed in a way that prevents these types of common attacks and lets this work in a distributed way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that makes sense. So it could help protect from different security threats by using it. But at the moment, would you say it's not being used necessarily by businesses, or is any manufacturing sector using it right now?
Yeah, so cryptocurrency is definitely being used actively for transfer of value, to buy, to purchase different items. The question really is where are we in the adoption curve and how easy is it for kind of mainstream users to access cryptocurrency? And that is something that's increasing. You can get cryptocurrency, based credit cards and debit cards, things of that nature. But I think that we're still early on that curve of it being, widely accepted in all these different places. But certainly something to watch out for.
Do you have any stories from your experiences that you think would be particularly helpful for baking companies?
So one of the things that gets me about security is that it is just as much technical as it is human. And no matter what we do on the technical level, we have to remember that the weakest link could be a person. So one story is to drive this home. I used to call people to try and convince them to give me their password. And this was testing their security awareness in education.
This is part of a job.
Yeah,
you weren't just doing it for fun.
Yes, that's true. It was part of a job.
Okay.
And one of the most effective techniques I had when I called them up would be, I would call them up oftentimes right before lunch because people wanted to get out to lunch. They didn't like having this phone call. And then I would immediately say, hey, I'm calling on behalf of security. I'm working with your IT person. I found their name. It's not hard to find online. Security is really important. I want to make sure you have a strong password. Don't tell me your password. That would be insecure. So I'm building trust. Like, why would a scammer tell you not to give you the password? Right. What I do need you to do is just go to this internal website, and type in your password and give me the score. And then when they go to that internal website, which is a bunch of numbers in the URL, it loads up. It looks like their company has photos that are similar to their website. They type in their password and they get a score. Like, hey, I got an 82. Is that good? Like, oh, that's great. That's great. And what I've done is that website is my website. And I gave them a number and IP address, which people don't really know the difference, and why should they? And it went to my site, and I stole their password right through that. And the 82 score is just, 75 plus the length of their password or something silly like that.
The score didn't matter at all.
Didn't matter at all. Yeah. So it just goes to highlight that there's lots of clever ways that the attackers can take advantage of humans, and we have to both educate humans so they have a fighting chance, and also use the right technology that takes those things out of the equation for them as much as possible. So if you are listening to this, use strong passwords, use 2FA. Those are some of the best things you can do.
Two-factor authentication?
Yes, two-factor authentication. That little code that is in your app or even sent over text, that's fine too. But use 2FA for sure.
Okay. I know I have some great takeaways from this conversation. I hope our listeners do as well. Thank you so much for joining us. This was great.
Thanks for having me.
Let us know what you thought of the show by emailing hello@americanbakers.org or leave us a voicemail at baketothefuture.org. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts: Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon Music, or Ghana.